It's another great day to be a Bear. Welcome to Tell the Whole Damn World, the podcast for Golden Bear fans. We're glad you're with us today. I'm your host, Reza Serafinejad. As I always like to say, if you're associated with the University of California, you're one of the luckiest people on this planet. Never forget that. It's the 6th week of 2025, and Ahmad Anderson and I have another fun episode on tap for you. This week, we spend some time with Roxy Bernstein, a Cal alum who has carved out quite the career for himself as a big-time sports broadcaster. It's hard for me to imagine so much time has passed, but I first got to know Rox back when we were students in the early 1990s, and now he's recognized coast to coast for his work covering college football, basketball, Major League Baseball, and the NHL. And in our Cal History segment with Leslie Mitchell, we'll learn about Cal's eternal sophomore, Brick Morse, an alum from the 19th century who was Cal's first three-sport letterman, but is best known for having written 2 songs that will live on forever in Cal history. But before we get to all of that, let's quickly recap some Cal sports news. The number 7 Cal women's gymnastics team beat Stanford in the big meet in the most dramatic way possible. As former featured guest, Maya Lazan scored a perfect 10 on the floor routine in the final event of the evening to carry the Golden Bears to victory over the 13th ranked Cardinal. Maya had a night for the ages and became the first Golden Bear in history to earn a perfect 10 in 3 different events. Cal's number 3 ranked women's water polo team put on an offensive explosion, beating number 17 San Jose State 17-6 and number 18 Pacific 23-8 to improve to 7-0 on the season. Cal rugby beat UCLA 36-7 to remain undefeated, and Cal lacrosse beat UC Davis 15-14 in their season opener. On the flip side, the number 21 Cal women's basketball team ran into a buzzsaw in South Bend, losing by a lot of points to number 3 Notre Dame. The 21st ranked Cal softball team opened their season playing 5 games in the span of 3 days. They're 3-2 after falling to Arizona State 6-4 in the finale of the Kajikawa Classic in Tempe. The Cal men's basketball team beat NC State to sweep the Wolfpack this season, but then lost to Wake Forest at Haas. They're now 12-12 overall, 5-8 in the ACC, and take on number 2 Duke at Cameron Indoor Stadium this Wednesday. Should be an easy one. And the Cal ice hockey team, the team that has captured the love and attention of Cal fans worldwide, fell just short in the Pac-8 title game against Washington. Playing without Kodai Mizuno, the team leader in points, who broke his clavicle in the semifinals. It was a rough start for the Golden Bears, who fell behind 3-0. Late in the third period and down by a single goal, the Golden Bears tried to tie the game, but yielded an empty net goal with 16 seconds left to lose 7-5. They're now 27-1, and they damn well better receive an invitation to regionals later this month. In golf news, former Golden Bear Michael Kim had an amazing run at the PGA Tour Phoenix Open, finishing tied for second. And in football news, although the details remain a little unclear, the word is that former All-American linebacker and Cal Hall of Famer Ron Rivera, who also happens to be a 2-time NFL Coach of the Year, is coming back to Cal to serve in a GM capacity. Golden Bear fans everywhere on the planet are still standing and cheering after that news broke last week. Up next, we'll be joined by Leslie Mitchell for our weekly Cal History segment. We'll learn about a Cal alum who should be considered the truest of all old blues. Brick Morse not only competed as a student athlete at Cal, but founded the Cal Glee Club and the Big C Society, wrote the first book about Cal football, and became a columnist who loved to write about Cal. He was inducted into the Cal Hall of Fame as our first 3-sport letterman. Oh, and he also happened to write a couple of songs that will live on forever in Cal history. With a big thank you to the Cal Band, we're going to lead into our Cal History segment with Leslie by listening to a little of the two songs Brick Morse is most famous for having written, Sons of California and Hail to California. And after that, we'll bring you our interview with Roxy Bernstein.
California, California, always strive for victory. I'll sing the joyful chorus as the colors we uphold and rock for California and for the blue and gold. Hey, sing!
Leslie Mitchell, class of 1981, is a third-generation Cal alum and lifelong Cal fan who was at Memorial Stadium 1982 for the play. She writes articles about Cal sports history on her website, calbearshistory.com, and tweets about all aspects of Cal's history under the name Cal Bears History, where she posts stories of interesting students, faculty, and alums. She's an absolutely wonderful resource when it comes to learning more about people associated with our university who have gone on to do great things in this world. We couldn't be more thrilled to have Leslie with us as part of our show. Today, we're excited to learn more about a Cal alum born in 1872, 4 years after the university was founded, who went on to do some pretty amazing things at Cal. Brick Morse was a Californian through and through, who should be considered the truest of old blues. Welcome again to the show, Leslie.
Well, thank you, Reza. Thank you for your kind words, as always. You know, we were talking before we went on. There's a monument just north of what is now Haas Pavilion that I don't know if people really have ever noticed or they've read the text on it. It's kind of a big granite monument, and then there's benches on either side of it. And it's a memorial to Brick Morse, which, as we were discussing, is pretty unusual. There really aren't very many memorials to individuals associated with the university. I mean, buildings are named after people and that sort of thing, but it's pretty impressive, which shows what he really meant to the university.
Right, yeah, it's right there on the northeast side of Haas Pavilion. I've seen that monument many times, and as a student, I remember reading it, and you know, it's something that when you just read something about somebody, it kind of, you know, you may retain some of it and you think, wow, and this person must have been somebody for them to have put a monument up there. But unless you actually see pictures or have something more visual to go off of, and that's why I'm so thankful to you for shining a little light on him in this segment today and having some pictures that people can actually see of the person, because yeah, he certainly seems to have left an indelible mark on the university and was involved in many different sports teams.
That's right. Football and baseball and track, all of them, and the Glee Club. He was a founder of the Glee Club, so he's definitely a Renaissance man. I refer to him as the Forrest Gump of Cal, early Cal history, because he seems to pop up everywhere. Because he remained involved with the university long after he was a graduate. But yeah, probably as a student, his most memorable mark was, well, founding the Glee Club is a big deal. But also he played in the very first big game in 1892, and the second big game, which was also in 1892. The first one was in March, and the second one was in December of the same year.
Yeah, I think he was actually featured pretty prominently there in the comeback that we had, where we, in that second of the two big games that year, where we were down 10-4, I think is what you mentioned.
Yeah, just so people don't, like, think what safeties. They had so many safeties back then. The touchdown was 4 points and an extra point. Well, it wasn't an extra point. It was the conversion was 2 points. So, so yes, we were down 10-4 and we had I believe it was an 87-yard last gasp touchdown drive to tie it. And of course, in those days, if it was a tie, the game ended with a tie. It was a tie. They didn't have any overtime provisions.
87 yards with his boys.
I was thinking exactly that, but and what I love is when he talked about it in his book, which we'll get into in a little bit. Brick Morse was just thrilled by the fact that there wasn't a single fumble on the entire 11-play drive, because back then they fumbled all the time, partly because the ball was so much larger and harder to hold, but also because they had this what they called the flying wedge formation, which was subsequently outlawed because so many college football players literally died on the field because of it, where the teams would lock arms and they would go running full speed at each other and try to force each other off the field. And after a number of deaths, that's one of the reasons Cal, by the way, later switched to rugby, because there had been so many severe injuries and so much death in college football, which is still a problem, but not quite as dramatic as players being carried off the field dead.
Wow. Yeah.
He was a good player in both the first two big games. He also, as I mentioned, he wrote this book, California Football History, which is the first history of Cal football or Cal sports of any kind. And he had this wonderful description of the first big game and how it went over at campus. Because remember, prior to 1892, there were no other colleges for Cal to play on the West Coast. We had never played another college. So we'd always played like little clubs in teams that came from a sports club in San Francisco or something like that, or a naval base club or whatever. So this was our first actual intercollegiate football game. So everyone was tickled. And here's his description. With the announcement of the coming event, the atmosphere at both colleges changed completely. There was but 1 month in which to prepare. Every student got into action, either by actual play or in spirit. There was no time for books. Everyone must think football and dream football. So he's kind of a dramatic writer, but I do think it captures just how exciting everything was. And he says that in San Francisco, people were just going up and down the streets, yelling and tooting horns, and thousands of people had little flowers or ribbons or whatever on their lapels that were either blue and gold or red. And it just like took over the whole Bay Area, apparently.
Well, yeah. And I mean, the thing that impressed me the most in learning a little bit more about him was that if not for him putting pen to paper and writing this down, he writes with so much passion, and it just paints this picture in your mind of what it must have been like back in that era. And we have him to thank for that. And so not only was he a participant as a student athlete in all those different sports, but like you say, he did the Glee Club, founded that, and went on to be a reporter, right? He had a column that he wrote in some paper in San Francisco, the San Francisco Call, I believe.
Right.
The
Call was, it's long gone, of course, but it was the third big paper back in those days. Newspapers were gold because that was the only way to get information. So yeah, there was the Chronicle, the Examiner, and the Call were the big three, and he wrote for the Call.
And I think you had mentioned to me offline that everyone knew how passionate he was about the university, and he would have the opportunity to write stories all about the goings on around campus and all of that. So, back in that era, had this platform and this opportunity to tell people whoever would read that paper about, how wonderful it was to be affiliated with the University of California. I think that's wonderful.
Yes, and he wrote. It was not a sports column per se, but it was. But he wrote a lot about Cal athletics because obviously he was very interested in it, and he made no effort to be unbiased, which was common at the time.
Just like us.
No, we're totally unbiased. But so yeah, he he is one of his other most famous things that he did for Cal was in 1920 when Andy Smith's teams were doing so well. That's the great season, the breakout season of Andy Smith. There were 3 consecutive wins. I think the scores were 127-0 over St. Mary's, 79-7 over Nevada, and then 63-0 over Utah. So it was pretty dominant, you might say, and wrote in his column that Andy Smith had created a wonder team, quote unquote, to which Andy Smith was very unhappy about that. He said that the kids are going to get cocky. It's going to hurt our play. Other teams are going to target us because we're so arrogant. And apparently, according to Brick, he just said, "Oh, come on, Andy, they are a wonder team." And Andy said, "Nah, they're overrated," which coaches have never changed.
Yeah, sounds a lot like how I imagine Jack Clark would react to something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you hear it all the time in coach press conferences, but the name stuck, and that's why we call them the Wonder Teams, is because of Brick Morse.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then, I mean, even with all this and kind of being this chronicler of the goings on around campus and having that strong affiliation with the university long after he graduated, the thing that I think most stands out about him is that he was so into music and would compose songs. And it's 2 songs in particular that he's best known for, right?
Yes, indeed. In fact, he said in his book, I wrote so many songs in my head, I'd forget them before I had time to write them down. He wrote dozens and dozens of Cal songs, but 2 of them that really stuck around. One of them is Sons of California, which is traditionally the second song that the band always plays in its pregame show. And then the other is Hail to California, which is generally played before every game, at basketball games and such. And is also now used, I've known this from going to games at Davis, since I live in Sacramento, that it's used as their alma mater at Davis. And I think some of the other UCs use it as well. So those are 2 big songs.
Without question.
He took over leading the Glee Club when he was an alum for decades, and he took them on tours to Europe and tours to Canada multiple times over a period of like 30 years. So he was always part of the campus community.
Well, that's just so special. I mean, when you think about it, from that era, to have written these songs that have stood the test of time and that are completely interwoven with the university's history, that they'll live on forever. It's, no wonder that they built this monument in his honor there outside of Haas Pavilion.
You asked me at the beginning, well, before we got on air, like, why is he called Brick? And I just want to say, I have no idea. I think it was just a fun nickname. Everybody had nicknames. I mean, we had another Brick on the Wonder Team, Brick Muller, who we'll probably talk about at some point. We have, Pesky Sprott. We have a guy named Lol Pringle, LOL. So they're just, everybody, you got to have a nickname. Kangaroo, Carlsberg. I mean, you just got to have it. And he was Brick.
Well, Brick certainly sounds like the sturdiest of Golden Bears. And he was certainly a Californian through and through, and who carried the spirit of California through him. No question about that. So thank you so much, Leslie, for sharing all of that about Brick Morse, and we appreciate your time on these shows, and we look forward to seeing you again next week, huh?
Well, thank you very much, and go Bears.
Go Bears! We really love having Leslie on the show to help shine a light on these wonderful figures from the past. Above and beyond everything else he did, Brick Morse will live on forever as one of the truest Golden Bears to have ever lived, in large part thanks to his songs. Speaking of Cal alums who wrote songs or chants that will live on forever, my co-host, Ahmad Anderson, will join me next, and together we will welcome Roxy Bernstein to the show. We're going to lead into that interview by sharing a short clip of Roxy's final sign-off for the Pac-12 network.
On a personal level, this league is deep in my heart and soul. As a Bay Area kid, I went to Cal and Stanford games. I grew up on Pac-10 sports, was introduced to the legendary athletes, teams, tradition, rivalries. Graduating from Cal and getting my first big break when I was 23, becoming the radio voice of Cal basketball, I've been associated with this conference for nearly all my life. Like so many of you out there, it means more to me than I can express. It's been such a privilege to sit in this seat and be a part of it all. It's been a fantastic run, and we've had an absolute blast bringing you these games. As my good friend Bill Walton says, thank you for my life. As we leave you tonight, here's a look back at some of the most memorable moments from the last 12 years.
I'm not sure if our featured guest really needs any introduction, but I'll do my best here just in case. Roxy Bernstein is a Cal alum and sports broadcaster who has seemingly been a Golden Bear his entire life. I first got to know Roxy as a student when he was the student manager for the Cal men's basketball team. He served as the sports director for Calix Radio and got his first big break at the age of only 23 when he took over the radio broadcasting job for the Cal men's basketball team. He held that position for years before going on to national prominence as a broadcaster for ESPN and the Pac-12 networks, covering college football, basketball, Major League Baseball, and the NHL. We deeply appreciate him making the time to join us today on the show. Welcome to the show, Roxy.
Rez, looking forward to it, Ahmad. Good to see you.
Yeah. And to kick things off right away, I mean, we led in with your little final broadcast there on the Pac-12 network. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were going through and your emotions as you were doing that last broadcast?
It was hard. That whole day was really weird because I knew it was the finale. Like, there was no tomorrow as far as the Pac-12 network went. And then the next night, when I did the last Pac-12 event for the league as we know it on ESPN. And those 2 days were extremely challenging just emotionally. Coming to grips with the end of a conference that I've poured a lot of my heart and soul into, and to see it disappear, or at least it's not going away, but it's not in the same form that we know it. And I was coming to grips with that. I knew that Bill Walton was not well, so that also factored into my emotions. And it's kind of a good thing the camera went off me when it did, Rez, to be honest with you, because I lost it. Like, as soon as I cued for the highlights and a look back at the 12 years of the Pac-12 network, I broke down. And I was fighting it during the whole time as I was eulogizing the conference. And I knew I was speaking not just for myself, Rez, but for all the employees of the conference, of the network. I was speaking to and with the fans that were so supportive of us for years and covered those teams. And all that really weighed heavily on me. And I somehow managed to get through it without losing it on the air. But there were a lot of tears shed, and there was a line out the door of that booth in the press box at Scottsdale Stadium of people that were feeling the same way I was. And they were coming up to me saying how thankful they were. I said that it meant a lot to them. That meant the world to me because I know I was speaking to those people, because behind the scenes people, the network did so much to make us look good on camera. And it really was a trying time for all of us. And I knew my career was going on. I had a contract with ESPN. The Pac-12 network was really kind of a side job for me. Like, okay, most people drive Uber as a side hustle, right? The Pac-12 network was kind of my Uber. And ESPN was great about letting you work for them, but I still had a lot invested in it. And the presentation for games on the Pac-12 network was different than it was for ESPN. But I knew I was going to have a future. I just wasn't exactly sure where it was going to be in terms of what sports and what schools I'd be covering. But it was a real tough weekend for me. And I kept wanting to put it off, and I didn't want to think about it all football season, then all basketball season. Then at the end of the baseball season and that weekend, it hit me like a ton of bricks.
I can imagine. I mean, just hearing you talk about it, I mean, just makes me tear up because, I mean, it was such a heartfelt and just genuine goodbye, and the way that you put it all into words, and it was just so beautifully done. And I think everybody really appreciated that, and just the way that you wrapped it all up, and it made a lot of sense for you to be that person who kind of turned out the lights on it all. So
it was an honor to be that person and a responsibility to make sure I did it properly. And I thought we did. And there was a lot of consultation. Look, I'd like to say that, I didn't do that by myself. Like, yes, I delivered it. And yes, I pretty much wrote all of it, but I had some help, some of the executives at the network, and I leaned on them and wanted to kick it around with David Coppett, who was our vice president in charge of talent, and Larry Myers, who's our vice president in charge of production, and live event programming. So I leaned on those two, and they were really helpful to me, helping me through that process, and then being able to deliver it that night. Certainly did mean a lot to me that I was the one. I was one of the first hires when the Pac-12 network started, and I was the last live person you saw on the air for the Pac-12 network.
Yeah, it was great, Lex. I tell you, for a guy who walked into the University of California, Berkeley, having lived my life just a 2-bar train away, walking into the Pac-8, playing in Pac-10, and then living through the Pac. Thank you, man. Because even for someone who has walked those same, groves and halls and know the way of life in Berkeley, that's all I got. The Pac-10, Pac-8 was all about. But as we get into later, being able to walk that line is amazing. But thank you. And I'm glad I was able to show that gratitude.
Well, and one thing I was just going to jump in and say is that, I mean, honestly, Roxy, the way that you and everybody there at the Pac-12 Network actually made all of us care more about these other teams in our conference. I mean, it was really well done. And I think, especially with you paired with Bill Walton, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I mean, the Conference of Champions and just all this pride in being associated with the Pac-12, what you guys did to elevate it and to make all of us really care more about being a part of that conference was really a job well done.
Pride is the right word, Rez, because we did take pride in it. And yes, I had loyalties to Cal, but I also had loyalties to the other 11 schools. And my job was to tell the stories of these student athletes and the remarkable achievements that a lot of them had over the years. And we took pride in getting to know the players, their families, being able to tell those stories from a personal level. And I appreciated that they let me in, and there was that trust factor that they knew where I was coming from. They knew what I was about. I was loyal. And it really resonated with me, some of these kids over the years, being able to share what they've gone through. And it's different than ESPN. Look, ESPN, we're documenting the game, but we're also documenting what's going on across the country in terms of, okay, yes, I was covering the Pac-12 on that particular night, but I'm also filling you in on the ACC or the SEC. The Pac-12 network, we weren't necessarily doing that. It was about this conference and why this is the Conference of Champions, and delivering that message and being able to connect with the audience at home, because I think they appreciated we were able to pull the curtain back on, and so they were able to get to know the kids that were playing, whether it was volleyball, whether it was basketball, softball, baseball, whatever it was, that they could identify with that kid representing that university.
Right. All right. Well, hey, we got a lot to talk about, so I think we got to step off of that. But I wanted to go way back, and Roxy is not a name that you come across very often. And I just love, because I have an unusual name. So I was always kind of tickled and just thought, how did you get the name Roxy?
I got it from my dad before I was born, and it just stuck. My dad and mom were at 3:00 in the morning, right, asleep. My mom gets up to go to the bathroom. My dad kind of rolls over half asleep. Now, my dad was a really good golfer, and he had a caddy whose name was Roxy. And so my mom gets up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, and my dad, maybe he's thinking about that putt on 17, I don't know, leans over and goes, "Hey, Roxy, where are you going?" And my mom's like, "Who's Roxy?" And from that point on, it stopped. They didn't know if I was going to be a boy or a girl. And it's not my given name, but it's the name I've always identified with, gone by. And even from that point on, everybody would ask, not how's the baby doing, how's Roxy doing? So it became my name even before I was born, even though it's technically not my legal name.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that story. And so, when I think of you, I think you have just always been associated and affiliated with Cal. You grew up here in the Bay Area. When do you remember when you went to your first Cal game? When was that? And how did you decide to come to Cal?
I honestly don't remember my first game. I know I was going to football games as a kid. Like, my uncle went to Cal. Neither of my parents did. My dad went to San Jose State and the University of Missouri. My mom went to UCLA. But I had an uncle that went to Cal, and my uncle would take me to games with him. From the time, now he's not married, has never had kids, and he's been like a second father to me. And I probably started going to games when I was 3. And taking me, and as a little kid, going to the Cal games. And I remember that. I remember the first real big game I remember was 1979, the game at Stanford. And it was a controversial game. And it's funny how everything in life kind of comes back around. And Rez, as you know, I worked for the Marlins for 3 years in Miami. Well, the guy who caught the winning touchdown in the 1979 big game for Cal was Joe Rose. Fast forward to when I go to Florida, Joe Rose is a huge media star in South Florida. He's doing the radio analyst work for the Dolphins. He's hosting a morning radio show on the same station that the Marlins are on. He's hosting the sports at night on one of the TV stations there. So I sought out, I had to meet Joe Rose because I didn't know him. And Joe has not come back very often to Cal. He's home in South Florida. His wife's from down there, even though he has family up in the Sacramento area. And Joe and I hit it off instantaneously. And we're still friendly to this day. But if you guys remember the 79 big game, he made a catch in the back of the end zone from Rich Campbell for a touchdown. It was originally ruled incomplete because Stanford had the box end zones with the Stanford logo, and there was like a yard of green that was grass between this logo and what would be the back of the end zone. Joe Rose landed in that green, but at the time, the referees said incomplete, out of bounds. This was obviously before instant replay. Then they got together and discussed it, overturned the call, touchdown Cal, not won the big game. And that's my first real recollection of going to a big game in 1979.
Well, I remember it. I was there.
In uniform.
In uniform. My first big game as a player. And as you recall, Roxy, Joe is standing like with his hand up and he's pointing. You know who he was like the modern day Travis Kelce. And his size, his whole antics, his swag, all the above. He's standing, he doesn't move. He goes, he looks at the ref, has the ball, has his hands up, and then starts pointing like, I haven't moved. It's right here. Incredible. Incredible.
And he still looks amazing today. Like he is, first off, he's Joe's what, probably 60, mid 60s?
I'm 65.
Yeah. And he still looks phenomenal. Like he looks like a guy 20 years younger.
Good Lord.
Also has the distinction. This is like his rise in South Florida, his claim to fame. He caught Dan Marino's first touchdown pass in the NFL.
Yes. Yeah. We'll have to talk about that later because I'd like to get reconnected with Joe. I was at his wedding, at his bachelor party, hung out with him in his F-150 white turquoise truck back in the day. So we'll talk.
He's a good man. I just saw him. I had a Dolphins game for ESPN Radio back in September, and I caught up with him that week because I was getting clued in, trying to get some info on the Dolphins, and then we hung out, ate pregame meal, the press box there in Seattle. And another crazy connection with the Dolphins to Cal Lore is Andy Park.
Yes.
So he is part of the management, and Steve Ross, who loves the Dolphins, and Andy have a friendship from a business, and he brought Andy involved with the management of the Dolphins. And
Yes.
Andy's an awesome guy, too. He's so fun to be around.
That's my guy. He was instrumental in me getting into the Hall of Fame, he and Joe Cooper. So I just talked to Andy the other day.
What a good man.
Great guy. So 2 connections to radio. One is, and I had 2 guys, one my fraternity brother, another guy who went to Cal. They had a show on there, and it was Ben Gold and Natty Graham. And they used to do Ben Gold was the DJ, and they used to, it was Benjamin Gold, and we called him Ben John. So that's what really hooked me into college, other than listening to the game. And then I worked for KPFA as the HR guy for Pacifica Foundation and interim general manager. And so they used to have me do voiceover, reach out today to the donation to KPFA. So tell me what that's like, because I always loved it. Rez has me back into this stuff, but tell me how you got there and connecting with the community, making that.
It was, the experience I got there was invaluable because it laid the foundation for what I'm doing now. And we had a lot of opportunities at KALX to do play-by-play of football, men's, women's basketball, baseball. We did a nightly sportscast. There was a weekly talk show called Bear Talk. I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to do when I got to Cal as far as my career. And I knew that I needed to get experience. I'd never really done it, but this was a path I wanted to go down. I was fascinated by it. And I came to the conclusion at a relatively young age that I knew I wasn't going to go to the or be able to make my living professionally playing something, but what's the next best thing? And literally the first week I was on campus as a student at Cal, I went right to CalX, which was right around the corner from Henry's back in the old days. Now it's on campus in the bottom of Barrows. But I went in and I wanted to work in the sports department. And they, reach out to the sports director, and I did. And lo and behold, I became, nobody was getting paid. So we were all volunteers. And right away, I got an opportunity to do some stuff and be on air. And that experience was phenomenal for me, and some great friendships with people I'm still friendly with, close with today, that have stayed in the business. Some haven't, but it was an awesome experience. And that's where I started a lot of these relationships and learned a lot about the business, cutting my teeth and being able to fail and learning, I don't like how I phrase this, because it's like anything else. My career in my profession is like anything else. And you guys know this. The more you practice something, the better you're going to get at, right? If you're a basketball player, the more free throw shots you take, the better shooter you're going to be. If you're on the golf course, the more swings you take, well, you're going to have a better swing and being a better golfer.
Same thing with broadcasting. The more reps you get, the better you're going to get at it, and the more comfortable you're going to be with yourself and your personality on the air. And it was awesome. I was sports director for 2 years, my last 2 years of school. And that's where you kind of learn about the business side a little bit too, what you're talking about, trying to raise money to support a budget, going out. Now, also necessarily advertising was underwriting. We were a nonprofit, but be able to fund, and so we could go on the road and broadcast the road games. The athletic department helped out a lot because there was no, for example, station for women's basketball on the air, so they helped subsidize us. And baseball, the same thing. So it was tremendous experience for me, and I would not have been able to be in a position to be hired by Kevin Renault and Cal when I was 23 if I didn't have that experience, and they were well aware of me, and clearly they thought something in my ability to be able to hire me at that young age.
So awesome that you're saying that, because I'm flashing back to when I did public address for Cal baseball. And I remember distinctly looking over to my left, and it's a small little press box there at Stu Gordon Stadium, right?
And one.
And I looked over at you, and you're sitting there, and you got a little microphone, and you are doing the play-by-play. Nobody's listening to you. You're just recording yourself. You are just practicing and practicing. And I've always been so impressed by two things. One is just the idea that you knew what you wanted to do. And you went for it, and look at you now, and the fact that you worked so hard at that craft. And I have no idea, and I'm certain this doesn't play at anything at all, but you mentioned Kevin Renault, and I remember distinctly being up at the media relations office, and Kevin pulled me aside one day, and he knew I knew you, as a student and as a friend, and he asked me, so what do you think about this guy Roxy? And I told him, I said, this guy has got what it takes. This guy really works hard at it. He won't, if you give him this opportunity, he won't let you down with it. So I have no idea if that played any part.
You swung him, Rez. I have all this to thank because you swung Kevin Renault in that one.
Yeah, the guy who wore Argyle sweaters and suede bucks all the time.
But man, I mean, I just, when I see how far you've gone in your career, it's just really impressive. And just, I couldn't be more proud of you there for everything that you've been doing. But, I was just trying to coordinate and finding time with you to do this little podcast interview here today. I mean, man, you are traveling all over the place. And I remember even when you were doing the radio announcing for Cal basketball, I mean, there is all of this prep work that is involved that goes on behind the scenes that I don't think people really truly have have much appreciation for. But I mean, can you just kind of take us through like just how many different meetings and how much time is involved in all of that?
Of the sports, the most time consuming is football. Now, granted, I usually only have one game a week. Sometimes I've had two. But in terms of meetings and going back and watching game film, football is the most time consuming because there's also so many people to be worried about on a field because you're worried about everybody on the two deep. Then there's probably some more guys. You have production meetings with each team, and Zoom has made that a little bit easier. For example, when we do a football game, usually meet with the visiting team via Zoom, and the home team will meet with them in person the day before the game. But you're working on your charts. You're trying to familiarize and even get used to the body movement. So, okay, if you block down, you can't see a number, but you can see how they run and move. Well, that also clues you in who that player could be. And you need to go down the depth chart. Like I've always prided myself in being prepared because you never know what's going to happen. You never know if there's going to be an unsung hero, if there's going to be a Kevin Mullen that saves the day, right? You need to be ready for that. And you have to have information and tidbits. And of all the information that I gather in the course of a week prepping for a football game, or for the basketball game I have tomorrow night, the hockey game I did last night, I maybe use 5 10% at most of it. But you never know what you're going to need. You need to be prepared for that moment, even though this player may never contribute, but you never know before the game. And that's the challenging thing, is budgeting my time, prepping for these games. But you grind away, and the way I look at it, I don't work. Like, the work I have is the travel. Me getting in and out of rental cars, hotels, airplanes, being away from my family. That's the work. What I do is not work. What I do is a labor of love, because I'm getting paid to talk about sports, right? I'm on television last night broadcasting the Toronto Maple Leafs against the Seattle, right? I'm getting paid to go watch and talk about hockey. Tomorrow night, I'm getting paid to go and watch and talk about basketball between St. Mary's and Oregon State. People are paying me to do that, right?
Dream come true, right?
Yeah, right, much. Don't pull them in. But it's awesome. And look, if I don't know what I'd be doing if I wasn't doing this, but I also wouldn't love what I'm doing if I wasn't doing this.
Well, that's certainly reflected in the joy that you bring, and it is a big reason, I think, why you've been as successful as you have been, because you put in that time to do all the prep, and then you can just see how much fun you're having actually just being on the air and talking sports.
That's it. It's like two guys sitting on a bar stool watching a game. That's what I try. And so the viewer at home can identify, and, oh, yeah, almost like it's a casual conversation. Yes, I'm informing, but I'm also there to entertain, because let's face it, not every game we're going to be doing is going to be a really good game, right? And those games are the easiest to do. The games that are hard are the blowouts, the one-sided games, where how do we make this interesting? How do we keep the viewer locked in with us? And we need to make it entertaining. And that's, for example, why Walton was as good as he was. Because we could be doing a 25-point blowout, the Bill celebrating like it was the game of the millennium, and you were locked in to hear what he was going to say next.
That's for sure. I mean, man, when I think of the way that you and Bill Walton, I mean, the two of you just seem to have such a great friendship and relationship that was just evident for everyone to see when we saw you on the air together. And just wondering, I mean, obviously, I'm sure you have a ton of stories, but I think I read that you had done 300 different broadcasts with them.
I don't know if it was that many, but it was a lot. And over, the 12 years of doing games for both ESPN and the Pac-12 network together, and we were paired up a bunch, and our friendship started immediately. Like, the first game we ever did together, he still had custom that he didn't want to talk and converse with his partner before the game, because he wanted everything to be organic and natural. And essentially, our first conversation of the day was, "Hi, welcome to Hospital Pavilion, along with the Hall of Famer Bill Walton, Roxy Bernstein. Bill, we got Cal and UCLA tonight. We got a game, Roxy. Yeah, let's go. Game of the millennium." That was the first conversation. We'd always go to dinner after. But we had dinner after the first game we did, and we sat there for 2 hours just talking. And friendship I cherish to this day is, I would pinch myself as a 5-year-old, 10-year-old kid going up with it. I'm friends with Bill Walton? What? And it really was eye-opening to see his world, the way he brought me into it. And he made me a better broadcaster. He made me a better person, just being around him. And I'm still very friendly with his wife, Lori. In fact, as a family, we had dinner with her not too long ago. And every day I think, oh, I do. And I'm sad, but I also have a smile on my face, because I have this voice in the back of my head telling me, "You can't be sad. Please, come on, celebrate life. Here we go, one time." And, you just, he'd be so angry, when he passed away, and I was at Citi Field in New York getting ready to call a baseball game when I found out I got a phone call from somebody. Luckily, the game was rained out because I don't know if I would have made it through 9 innings that day, calling a game. And as, I'm shedding tears and thinking about Bill and having a tough time, there was this voice in the back of my head telling me, please, come on, stop feeling sorry. And I just can't get sad. Yes, I miss him dearly, but at the same time, I'm thrilled that I got to spend as much time as I did with him, and just a phenomenal human being to be around.
Yeah, I mean, it is boundless enthusiasm and appreciation for just every day that you're given. I think those are just the two things that when I think of him, that just, when I first heard about Bill Walton and didn't know him as a broadcaster, I was kind of like, this guy went to UCLA. I'm just, jaded and I'm biased. And then seeing him on the air, and it's like, you couldn't help but fall in love with a guy.
He loved Cal. Loved Berkeley. His parents went to Cal, so he had a special connection to the University of California. And it's funny because one time I posed a question to him on the air. And I said, look, it's long after Pete Newell had retired from coaching. But I said, if Pete Newell was still coaching when you came out of high school, would you still have ended up at UCLA? And he got mad at me for asking the question because I can't answer a hypothetical question. And, I was dealing in facts and reality, and you're dealing with another world. I'm like, no, I just want to know. But that's Bill. And I would have liked to know the answer. He still ended up at UCLA, but you never know.
You know what? You spoke to, what it was like to be a fan when you referred to the Stanford game of '79. What is it like, and how do you bottle that up when you're a broadcaster and that inner child or that adult who is sitting on your family and whatever, and you like that team? How do you stay watched?
I mentally, Ahmad, have to prepare myself before a game. Like, I've done it enough now in my career, broadcasting a Cal game for ESPN or what's the Pac-12 network, that I don't let my personal feelings come into the broadcast. And even when I was doing the radio for Cal, you never heard me say we. I would never refer to it because you have to have a semblance of professionalism. And it was always Cal. It was the Golden Bears. It was the Bears. It was I never was a Frenchman and referred to Cal as we. And early on, when I was a neutral broadcaster for ESPN and the Pac-12 network, I would tell my producer, let me know if I'm leaning in one direction or the other, because I don't want to give any indication that I have an allegiance to one school. And sometimes they would tell me I would actually lean the other way, just so people didn't think I was a Cal homer. And you can't play favorites. And I have a job, and I have to represent my employer. That's who I'm working for.
Sure.
Then, okay, yeah, I may want Cal to win the game, but it doesn't influence the way I do the game, and it can't. And that was a challenge early. It's not that anymore. Just because I've done it so many times, and also that I have a relationship now with other schools and coaches, and I like people. Like, there's coaches out there that I'm very friendly with, and there's also a trust factor, and they trust me. They know I'm not. If they tell me something, it's not like I'm running over to Mark Madsen and, hey, Mad Dog. That's not happening. Because if that were ever to be insinuated, my career is done. Like, I'm never to be trusted again. And I would never betray that trust that these coaches, these programs are having in me. And you can't.
Yes. I'd say to you, one time I don't know where I was, campus bar, somewhere near there, and like I generally, unless I'm going to the games, you'll see me on the weekend and I'm like Calgary. Always. Somebody's always asking, are you going to a game? This is weekend wear. This is how I roll. But when I'm out somewhere else, just out, not, I generally just try to be like that fly in the room. Not that I'm a cow guy. I don't want anybody to know. And I heard somebody say while you were on there, didn't he? Like, you were so focused during the game. And I just took my glasses off and was like, yeah. But that's great. That is,
You have to be.
you're the profession.
Yeah.
Quintessential profession.
I mean, look, if I'm sitting at home watching a Cal football game, for example, or I go to a game,
Yeah.
it's a little different because I'm not working. I'm off the clock. I could throw my remote control as good as anybody and drop an F-bomb when I'm frustrated by something, when a field goal kicker misses a kick.
Stop it.
I know. But that's me, but not the broadcaster. The broadcaster can't do that.
Yes, sir.
Like, I might hit my mute button. Like, the only time one time I got mad on the air, I was doing a Colorado football game. And it was like a 3rd and 7. And somebody jumped offside and gave Colorado a free play. And I kind of, the Colorado converted, got the first down, and I kind of got angry and said, "You can't do that." And my partner looks at me laughing because he knows it's been bottled up and then it just spilled over.
Yeah.
That's kind of the only time it's ever slipped, to be honest with you.
I mean, that's amazing to me because I know you, Rox, and I know how passionate you are for the Golden Bears. So the fact that you can remain unbiased and keep that all bottled up, I mean, that's a testament to willpower. Oh man. Well, I was going to ask. I mean, you've been around broadcasting now for so long, and around the Cal community, and you've gotten to know so many different people. But I was always kind of surprised that you and Adam Jurwitz have a pretty strong relationship, right? The lead singer of the Counting Crows, and how did that all develop?
We had a bunch of mutual friends, and Adam is such a huge Cal fan. He went to Cal in the mid to late 80s. And we just kind of struck up a friendship because of our personal love for Cal. And we still have a text thread that we call the Kings of California. And there's a whole group of us that are on there that includes Adam and a bunch of our friends. And it's kind of grown over the years. Mike Silver's a part of that group text thread, but he was in my wedding. And so we've had a very strong friendship for a long time. And again, we share that bond, that love for Cal athletics, and the connection, for example, that we're both very friendly with Justin Wilcox, even away from the game. And that's why it's so important to us to see him succeed and do well, and for the program to do well. And last year was certainly, look, nobody's more frustrated than he was that they were 6-6 and all those opportunities slipped away. I mean, nobody cares more than he does, but we certainly care a lot too. But we also want the best for him, and that's why what's gone on recently with some of the movement in the portal and the players coming in, and the new quarterback situation, that it's exciting to see what's going on, and we're all ecstatic that we're thinking, okay, this has the potential to be a really special year in 2025.
Yeah, now we got Ron Rivera coming back too.
How about that?
That's pretty cool. That's very cool.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
As you just referred to, Adam, the relationship, the text thread, your relationship with Coach Wilcox and wanting the best. You've had, for many, a lifetime experience of what Bear Territory is all about. As we ask our incredible guests, and we're about to ask you, what would say would be your Bear Territory moment you've experienced?
There's been so many, but being at the 82 big game and being at the play, and literally I could barely see the field because everybody was standing, and I was still a little kid at the time, and I'm on my uncle's shoulders watching the play unfold and develop. And that they found a way to win when it didn't appear there was any hope at all. That was what resonated with me, and that was a Bear Territory moment that has stayed with me. And what really ingrained Cal and the culture in me was being at that event, which is the greatest play in the history of college football.
You must have been 10 years old back then, right?
Yep.
And I was about to say, now I'm real old.
I was in section H, row 53.
Oh, good.
So, and Kevin was running down the sideline right in front of where I was sitting. So, yeah.
This just got grayer. I felt the gray just.
I got it starting to come in. You can see it.
As soon as you said you on your little shoulders at 10, just like.
Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, two things before we let you go here, Rox. And again, we really appreciate your time here. But is there anything you wanted to tell Cal fans out there? And, I know since you cover the NHL, have you been following what's been going on with the Cal ice hockey team?
Oh,
Beat it. How about that?
They won again today, this morning.
Are they 26-0 now?
Think so.
Think
so.
How about, was it Javian Thomas and Jay Knott were dropping the ceremonial first puck a few weeks ago?
crazy.
That's awesome.
I was in the bookstore earlier this afternoon, and I'm looking for the hockey stick. So I went over to the manager and said, "Hey, we got some Bear Territory stuff." No. Where's the hockey stuff? Dude, you got every shirt in here but hockey. They're undefeated. What you doing? I mean, come on, Cal.
Little did we know we're actually a hockey school. For years we thought it was water polo, rugby. We're really a hockey school. How about that?
I almost checked him in the bookstore. Smart.
That's awesome. Well, Roxy, what can we say? We really appreciate your time here today. I know you're a busy man, but man, to see your evolution and how you've grown and, just become this nationally well-respected broadcaster. And I just couldn't be more proud of you, Rox. And we just appreciate you making the time here today to spend a little time on our little podcast.
It's always fun. Happy to talk about something near and dear to my heart. And this was a fun stroll down memory lane for me.
Great. All righty. Well, we'll end it the way we always end it. And go Bears.
Go Bears.
It's always great to be able to spend a little time with Rox. He and I go way back, and even though we never really hung out, I'll always think of him as a friend and a true Golden Bear. You have no idea how busy he is traveling from place to place covering different sports, and we really appreciate him making the time to be on the show. That's going to do it for this week's episode. I say it every week, but we really appreciate all of you out there listening and watching. If you're enjoying these podcasts, please tell all your friends to subscribe. The more viewers and listeners we have, the easier it will be for other Cal fans to find us. And if you're just listening to these podcasts, you can also watch us on YouTube. You can find us under Tell the Whole Damn World. Next week, We're still trying to coordinate schedules, but we are hopeful to have the coach of the Cal ice hockey team on the show, Devin Cox. We're looking forward to talking to him about the incredible season the Cal ice hockey team has put together and to learn more about the challenges involved with being the head coach of a team that doesn't get support from the athletic department and has to pay its own way. Before we go, if you'd like to drop us a note to say hi or pass along any suggestions, we would love to hear from you. Just drop us an email at tellthewholedamnworld@gmail.com. And finally, I'd like to remind you about ACTS ALS. You can learn more about their mission to help turn ALS into a treatable disease by visiting axals.org. That's axeals.org. If you're able, please consider making a donation. See you next week. As Doctor Who famously says, we're all stories in the end. Make it a good one. What stories do you want to share? We want you to boldly tell the whole damn world about it. Go Bears!